Hello, everyone. Welcome. Just give me a shout out that you can hear me. I think I'm seeing Mike working. So, welcome. We are talking about antennas today. So, I have a bunch of pictures to talk through. I have some topic that I've kind of accumulated from all the videos that I've done and people asking questions. Hello. Hey, Nick. Hello, Helium Down Under. Yeah, I'm excited to hear about Australia getting in on this, on Helium. So it's very exciting. We're all, at least I'm still waiting for miners, my own miners that I ordered a long while back. Hey, Jay. Thank you for being a fan. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I have some props that I want to talk through real quick. First thing, though, is I get a lot of questions about equipment. What equipment do you use? I usually put that in the description on the whatever video. So if you click on there, if I don't put the equipment in there, it's usually because I don't have a good link or I've forgotten it. So just comment on the video and then I'll try and pull a link to the equipment that you need. So, all right. This is the first thing I want to cover because over the past week or two, somebody was saying that I was wrong and about the connectors on some of the things. So I wanted to cover that exactly. And this is a picture from where I get my cables from. This is USA Coax. I don't have links to suppliers in the EU and such, so I could probably drum one up if necessary. But I want to cover this because this is really, really important. So the rack miner uses this on the back side. So pretend that's not a cable, and this is what the connector looks like on the back side. So that is an RP SMA female. Now you notice that there is a pin in there, and this confuses a lot of people because it's RP SMA. Because you go over and you look at the SMA male, and here's the pin in here. This is a huge, huge difference. And when I got my adapter problem, when I originally confused, I ordered the SMA male connector to connect to the RP SMA female. And it didn't work. And so I had to get an adapter, and I got really confused about this. So I wanted to point this out, that the rack miner uses this connector on the back side. And so your cable to your antenna needs to have RP SMA male. Now, if you have a different miner, so I've used the OG white hotspot, and then I've also used the rack miner. So both of those have this as the connector off the back, and then your cable would be the RP SMA male. Now, what are Bobcats? What are Syncrobits? What are Nebras? Well, I can go off their documentation, but as we found out even this week, that even Rack's documentation is technically wrong. They updated it once, so they updated it for the miner side, but they didn't update it for the antenna side. So I chatted them up, and that change is coming in their documentation. And then CalChip also has the same problem, and theirs actually even has the wrong connector on CalChip's website. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Troy. This confuses the heck out of people. This is very confusing. You need to understand the difference between the two. Definitely. So that's why I wanted to highlight this one first. And if you are so scared of being wrong, go order a pack of adapters off of Amazon or wherever you can find them, and then just grab a couple proactively. It really is not fun to be down for a couple days while you wait for an adapter. The reason why I'm doing all these videos is really to help everyone hit the ground running. Or even if you're a host and you're saving up your HNT to buy your own hotspot or something like that, I've done these videos to help you hit the ground running once you get your own. So I see what question on the name of my miner. I prefer not to give out that information. So far, I've been pretty protective of that. So, and I plan to continue doing that. If you are curious about a particular miner, the program that I'm doing is called the People's Hotspot. It's hashtag the People's Hotspot. And you can go look up that. I will freely give any information about that to any of you, or on air, as it were, about that specifically. So just wanted to give you that information. So feel free to look up that, and we can discuss that hotspot in particular. There will be multiples coming online. So currently the only People's Hotspot that I have right now is Puny Pecan Eel. And that one was using an 8 dBi, actually the antenna that I was holding up in the picture as a sword. And so they were using that. They just switched, I believe, to a 10 dBi antenna. So I'm free with talking about that. And then there's other People Hotspots coming online as well that we can talk about. That's the conditions kind of the program, is that, hey, it's going to be public for a little bit, but I don't share any names or anything like that. Obviously, everybody's locations are public. So I do share the hotspot name. So that's kind of, some people I don't think have signed up for the program because they aren't interested in that. So, but I protect the host information as well. So, okay, next one. Next one's very important. Next prop. This is a signal chart. So when you're looking at your signals and whether you're passing or failing, or if the signal is valid or invalid, when there's a challenge or when you get a witness, you basically have to track this SNR value and this RSSI value. And then you kind of coordinate based off of those values. And if you click on any of the witnesses, when you get a witness, you can click on that and it will give this information. So you follow wherever that is and then track it too. So if it's up here, oh, you're good. Now, if you're right here, you might consider what you can do to improve that, if anything, because you're really close, and some are just over the line. So then you might want to think about what you can do differently, or check your antenna alignment, that kind of stuff. But this is a great chart. And all of these are on the Helium Discord. You can go into the antennas channel, and these are all pinned. So I just printed these off and wanted to talk through them. So this is a way to figure out if you're valid or not. Now, I don't have a link handy that I'm aware of, but later on I will drop a link to a particular dashboard that was done by, I believe it's Wishplorer is his or her Discord name, and that charting mechanism is awesome for diving into if you had invalid witnesses, and it will say too strong, too low, or whatever. So I noticed on the Rack 8 dBi, when I had that up, I was getting lots of invalid witnesses quite regularly. And then when I switched over to the Nearson, that all went away, but then also kind of my earnings dropped a little bit. So that was really interesting. So I'm considering going back to the Rack 8 dBi. All right. Now, 8 dBi, 9 dBi. This is the last graphic that I wanted to show. Oh no, I didn't print off one of them. Let's see if I can do that real quick. I don't have it up. Shoot. Oh well, this one will do anyways. So this one I'm meant to zoom in a little bit more. So it's important to understand that the difference in these kind of shapes emanating from the antenna. Now, I'm sorry, it's kind of hard to read these values, but it's 1 dBi, 3 dBi, 6 dBi, and 9 dBi is each of these. So this has a little car going up a hill and at the top of the mountain. And so it's talking about the way that different antennas operate. This is really, really important. So on this 9 dBi, it's very flat, but it goes out for a long ways. So if you're in a flat, if you're in a flat area, well, then you'd have probably a lot more coverage. But if you're on a hill, so say this one right here, is using just a 3 dBi. And so this actually might be a better way to go about if you're on the side of a hill. So hopefully that helps you a lot. This, again, this chart is pinned on the Helium Discord in the antennas channel. Totally recommend you think about this as you're placing antennas, because there's a lot of complexities. I will also give a shout out for helium.place. That's another website where you can see where the hexagons are regarding hotspots, and if you can, what spacing you would need. Everything revolves on the line of sight, but then as that line of sight kind of ripples out, you can think it can bounce off buildings and trees and all that kind of stuff. So it is a sound wave, so there are ripples going out, and so you can get some really interesting witnesses off of that just because it's bouncing off of something, bouncing off some tall buildings or what have you. So keep that in mind. Okay, so those were the props I had. I'm scanning for other. Would like clarification on the connection for the antenna and the miner. I think that this one solved that question. But another thing I will show, and people don't do a good enough job on this. So this is the rack 8 dBi antenna, and so this is the N-type. Oh shoot, male. There we go. I got to think about it just to make sure. I really care about being correct when I'm saying these. So this is the N-type male connector. Okay. So usually most of my cables are going to be N-type something on one end, and then like RP SMA male on the other side. And if you were here during my last stream, I showed these off. These are my 5-foot cables that if I start putting a hotspot outside, and I said back then that I was like, oh, you know what? I don't remember what the difference, or I couldn't tell you offhand what the difference are from these. And so here's your pop quiz. Here's your application. Let's see here. That's not coming in very well. Let's see if I can get this focused in. There we go. If you can see this, and I apologize, I can't control the focus on this, but this one has the pin and this one doesn't. So if I think about this, which one has the pin and which one doesn't? So let's take the one that has the pin. Is what? So these are both male connectors because you can screw on that little piece, but one has the pin. Okay, so that one, the one that has the pin would be SMA male, and the one that doesn't have the pin would be RP SMA male. I always like to quiz that. Throw yourself at that information a couple times, surprise yourself, and then see, did you get it right? All right. What are your thoughts on using a directional antenna? Some hotspots further away in a certain direction have better scaling for me. Great question. So one thing that I've said in this regard in a particular direction and where you'd want to do that is picture like a mountain range. Maybe you're in a valley and you're at one end of the valley and you want to get, 20 kilometers to the other side, or even 30 kilometers or something like that. That might be a better application for a directional antenna rather than a omnidirectional antenna. So omnidirectional goes all around. So when I showed these pictures of this picture, these are pretty much using omnidirectional antennas. The cable that I showed is an LMR 400. Yep. Okay. Let's see here. Frequency would be another thing, is that the cable shouldn't matter as far as it relates to frequency. If you're getting the LMR 400 cable, that shouldn't matter. It should be able to transmit on that frequency. Many other cables would, but the key thing there is loss, which I'll talk about next. But the frequency is unique to every country, or relatively speaking. So you'll want to look up what your frequency is. That's on Helium's website. So in the United States, it's 915 megahertz. In EU, somebody correct me, but I think it's like 868 megahertz. If I said that wrong, please throw it in the notes. But that is the frequency there. So dBi loss on a cable. On an LMR 400 cable, that's going to be 3.9 dBi per 100 feet. Or if you're operating in meters, that's about 30.5 meters. So 3.9 dBi on 30.5 meters. So with these, with my cable setup right now, I have a little bit over 30 feet. So what I'm doing is I'm dividing that 3.9 into 3, by 3. So I have about 1.3 dBi loss in my current setup. So some people will say, well, you shouldn't do that. Well, that's one thing that I'm accepting right now by having my miner inside rather than outside. Will windows potentially interfere with the radio wave strength if you have an indoor miner and the miner is inside your house? Yes. Well, I should say if the antenna is in your house. If you haven't done the appropriate routing to get your antenna outside the house, then yes, the windows could. There's some protective film that on many windows that it can affect that signal. So getting outside it really helps with the coverage. But an alternative is you place your miners so close. If you're developing a kind of a network of these locally, if you're placing it, still outside those 300 meters, but close enough that they can still communicate and you have it indoors, it doesn't matter then. I don't know if there is a way to check about UV blocking. I do know also that if you have screens, then that would affect your signal as well. As far as recommendations on antenna, that's what this entire live stream is about today. It's highly contextual. It depends on where you're at, on a mountain in your landscape, if it's flat, if there are hills, if there's tree cover. There's a lot of different variables as far as what is the best antenna for this particular case. A lot of times that they've gotten 20-kilometer witnesses off of the stock antenna. So it is highly, highly contextual. Obviously, height really helps. That's the number one thing. Now, Raj, there's lots of different antennas. There's lots of even higher dBi antennas that probably operate at that frequency. But the key thing that you'll run into there is with regulations. I think the miners themselves have a limit as well that I wouldn't know offhand as far as what they operate at. Okay. I did get a question about, does this affect TV and cellular reception? And this is public space Wi-Fi, or sorry, this is public space frequencies. So you're operating within those. And the key thing about regulations around those is that they make sure that you stay in that frequency space. If you deviate from there and affect other things like TV or say aircraft communications or something like that, then you will definitely have some regulatory body close to you coming and probably knocking on your door and saying, well, what are you doing? You need to correct this. And I talked about it, I think in one of the previous videos, of an instance where some equipment for the company I was working for at the time had something that was emitting EMI that was affecting cellular communications, and the cell phone company came in and told them if they didn't correct it, then there would be a lawsuit. So then it was very, very important that they correct it. So they are serious when you're doing this. So if you're operating outside or using way more dBi than you should be, you're taking a huge risk, and that's on you. Even a lot of the hosting companies cannot specifically endorse or encourage the use of antennas. They'll maybe create a space if we want to talk about it, but they can't encourage that, because then the liability might transfer to them, and of course they're a business and they want to protect themselves. So the key thing on those terms and conditions are you're accepting that risk, rather and that the host company can't be liable for that. Okay, another question. Beside the house, there's a cell phone tower 200 meters from it. Will it possibly affect the transmission from your miner? Possibly. It could be that just from signal wise, it hits the tower and then kind of disperses. So you might have like a hotspot directly on the other side of that antenna or that cell phone tower that you can't quite reach. So that would be a case of where it would affect yours. As far as transmission, I don't believe that it would, but I would have to. I mean, I'm fairly near some towers, and I don't see anything. In fact, some of my longest witnesses are kind of maybe in that range. So, yeah. How far can the default antenna reach with good elevation and placement? I talked about that just a little bit earlier. There have been witnesses where it's been 20, I think even to 50 kilometers off the stock antenna. So everything relies on elevation and an ability to propagate the signal. So you'll see people put them in their attics to even get a little bit more height. My ISP is blocking bad IPs that want to communicate with my hotspot. Is that normal? I do have port forwarding set up. So we're going to talk about antennas. I had talked about that in the port forwarding video a little bit. That would be onto your, let's just take that conversation offline, or over to the other video on port forwarding, please, because I want to keep those answers on those videos. Can we use a sectorial antenna 900 gigahertz? So once you're deviating from a lot of the recommended antennas, you're kind of on your own. There's a lot of antennas that I've seen people just ordering a host of them, and the key thing is, like, I mean, they're probably so cheap that you can get by experimenting with it. So figure out your results, and if you want to share them, I mean, I suppose some people are like interested in, if they're doing a fleet of these, then they want to get the cheapest antenna per location, and so that's a science. If you want to, duplicate that across, you're running into a lot of variables there that could be risky. Not just to mention earnings, though. A lot of those cheap antennas aren't made for outdoor use either, so keep that in mind. I heard that 8 dBi is very high transmission power, which is not allowed by the government. Is this true? Really depends on where you're located. It really does depend. I was running the rack 8 dBi and never had any troubles. Now I'm running the Nearson 9 and still no troubles from my perspective. So I think that it's okay, but obviously I'm taking that risk. If the FCC were to knock on my door, then definitely I would be like, oh, okay, well, I already have antennas on order that are lower dBi anyways, just to experiment, because there's been a lot of feedback. Hey, have you tried why 8 dBi? Why 9 dBi? Have you tried any of the others? And I haven't yet, so I'm going to, and of course share those results. Yeah, good point, Helium Down Under. Having a good antenna I'm just going to read this. Having a good antenna to listen, receive is more important than the level of transmit power. This is a huge one. So earnings are based off of your ability to receive data. Now, is there a little bit for transmit? Yeah, absolutely. But the earnings are really, geared towards you receiving the signals. Oh, good. I'm glad you asked the question on using an amplifier to boost hotspot antennas. So I don't know specifically on this question of can you use it. I mean, it's radio transmissions, so you could probably do anything you want, but it's up to it's under your risk. Now I'll even take it to just a practical example, or where I have used an amplifier before. So I used to live probably 50 or 60 miles away from a TV antenna. And so what I did was I put an antenna, an amplifier on I had my antenna, and then because my cable run was so long to my hotspot, no, I wasn't using a hotspot, just my TV antenna. So I was receiving TV signals and then bringing that back into my house. And because my cable run was so long from my antenna to where I would split out the signal, I had to get what's called a preamplifier. So as soon as that signal is received from over the airwaves, then it would go into the preamplifier, and then it would push it out through my network and like kind of really embolden it. Now, a lot of these preamplifiers, they have a way to restrict what frequencies are amplified. So TV antennas can just cut out a lot of the other noise if they have that particular apparatus in there. So all the other kind of noise would be filtered out. Which distance is the best between hotspots? I just bought 4 Nebras and I don't have any hotspots on my city. Welcome to the world of where do I place my hotspot? Where would I go first, maybe, is a question. Where would I place first? Now, you can place at your home because then that offers you the best ability to experiment with where you're going to place your other hotspots. And also experiment like, oh, do I want to try a different antenna here? It's easier just to climb up on your roof or swap out the antenna if you're doing that in your own home. Of course, if you live at the bottom of a valley or if you're surrounded by hills, well, that doesn't make the best sense for where you're going to put it. So maybe another part I would look at is what's the highest point that you could get it to. That would be another place that I would probably look for in an antenna placement or a hotspot minor placement, is going for height first. Because if you can get it, that's kind of, it's just easier. All right, another question that I've had a lot is, and there's multiple variations, is does the Rack 8 dBi, or pick any other antenna, does this work with, and then insert the Helium minor? So does this work with Bobcat? Does this work with Rack minor? Does this work with Nebra? Does it work with Syncrobit? I'll get that, lots of variations with that. And what I'll say is all these antennas are intended to operate at the same frequency. We talked about frequency at the beginning. So you really want to, it shouldn't matter what antenna you use, because all the minors are speaking at that same frequency. And that's what they're intended to do. So transmit and receive via that frequency. So if you have the right antenna that transmits and receives at that frequency, then it will line up right with that minor. It's a good question. It's a very simple answer. Is if an antenna works for one, they should work for them all. All right. I know someone that has 2 different models of hotspots at the same place, still making Helium tokens. Can you please explain how? So that's very easy. They're probably accepting that they're going to make a little bit less. So they're technically violating the 300-meter spacing. But a case where that might be is if you're at, say, you're at the bottom of a valley in a mountain range. Maybe it takes a turn, and then I'm just going to say practically, let's say it's a 45 degree turn. Well, then if you sit right at that corner of those two directions, you could place a miner with a directional antenna in each way, and then accept the fact that you're going to take 50% of your, or whatever, take lower earnings of that. I wouldn't recommend it. It would be much easier to just space them out by the 300 meters, and then you're making peak earnings. Of course, then you're not exactly witnessing off. You can witness off each other, but if you have directional antennas pointing away from each other, you aren't going to witness each other. All right. Does a double connector on the miner have lower antenna and higher antenna? I'm not sure exactly what that means. I do know that you can take multiple antennas and kind of combine them into one input into the miner. You're going to lose dBi at that point, though. We talked about dBi loss earlier. Another interesting question that I got was, does this broadcast, or does having an antenna on your roof broadcast out your personal Wi-Fi or your internet? Are you sharing your internet with your neighbors? And the answer is no. In the intent of, like, my neighbor is not going to browse Netflix off of my internet signal. That's not the intention of this. So now, are some people borrowing a portion of your internet? Say if they have a moisture sensor in their lawn, yes, but that's the intention of the Helium network. And what it does is so that anybody who has these sensors can move the data through your antenna. And yes, it does come in through the internet, but then of course, if you do all the port forwarding and security stuff, then you're good to go. So that is a incorrect belief about how it shares your Wi-Fi. It does not do that. All right. Another question that I've gotten is balconies. If we can't get to a roof, can we do it on a balcony? Is that safe? And I did see a lightning question that we'll get to, but this kind of relates to that. Is, are balconies safe? And most building codes now do require balconies to have some amount of lightning or grounding protection in them. So if you're grounding to the balcony, then you're probably okay, especially if it's a newer building. But I would say that that's not guaranteed. So you should probably investigate a little bit more on that for balconies. So the People's Hotspot, Puny Pecan Eel, is actually attached to a balcony, and there is a grounding cable running from that, and it's a metal railing on the balcony, so it's basically tied into that, and then that would function as a grounding for it. Can a lightning strike potentially damage my inside miner unit even if the outside is properly grounded? Elevated location with no higher buildings, trees nearby. Yes, you are always taking a risk by having an antenna outside. Now, I would say, even if the lightning can strike your house and you don't even have an antenna, you're always taking an electrical risk if your house gets hit by lightning. Hopefully it's properly grounded, but there always is that risk. And so that's why I really encourage people, as you're building, maybe these fleets, or if you're having multiple hosts, is have backup units on hand. And also have liability clauses as well, because that's very, very important to protect yourselves if that were to happen. And then also, just if a miner goes down, you're down a miner, and especially right now, that's a huge risk. Another question is if the antenna is fiberglass, I think, as it relates to the lightning. And while it's very intention that it's not going to be a huge conductor of electricity, many masts are using some sort of metal to push that up higher. So while it's still not as big of a risk, again, we want to be proactive with risks and try and do anything we can to if we can sway the lightning away, you know, by putting this grounding setup in, we would like to do that. Plus, there's other aspects, if you go back to the grounding video that I did, that it just generally helps reduce noise and have a better signal. And then, of course, better signal, better earnings. So just keep that in your mind. Another question that I did have to laugh at, just because I know, but it's also a good answer. I like these easy questions because I'm glad that you're asking them. So the question was, is grounding necessary if I have an antenna with a magnet mount to a metal roof? And that, like, is grounding necessary in that case if you have a metal roof? And I would say 100% yes. Think about that. If you're electrifying your entire roof, or say the entire building has like metal outside, then anybody leaning up against a wall could be electrified by that. So, or electrocuted by that. So keep that in mind. It's best to put in grounding wherever you can. If you're going outside with your antenna or your mast, put in the grounding. It's very much encouraged. And again, I'm not an electrician, so don't hold me to it. This is just from my research, is what I'd say. Do I think it is a good investment? Let's see here. This might be related to a previous statement. Yeah, so in that case, ordering 11 Bobcat miners or 11 miners with antennas, is that a good investment? I'd say yes, as long as you don't place them all in one spot. You don't want to do that. That would be bad. You would hurt your own earnings. Any more information on the Syncrobit miner? I don't have any of that information. That is one of the manufacturers I've probably followed the least, not because because I favor the other ones. I just haven't gotten to them yet. Yeah. We talked about amplifiers, and then we talked about FCC guidance. Again, that FCC or whatever local regulatory body you have, that is on you. I've also heard of people shipping miners to countries where you could receive them, and then going across the border to another country where you might either be on the edge or something like that. And definitely would not recommend that. There's still a lot of liabilities that you could take upon yourself. The intention of these manufacturers is really to work with the countries and the local governments to make it legal, right? I think Helium is very intentioned, like, look, we want to do this responsibly, so let's not do that. I think I can speak for them when I say that. All right, again, I just want to mention it because I get a lot of questions. Can you link to that antenna or whatever? I would check the descriptions on all my videos. I try and put the links in there. If I don't, just make a comment and I'll add the link later. Do you think that the Bobcat miner loses signal strength via the antenna cable? Anytime you have a cable, you're inserting loss. That's just a reality. So now, is it enough? If you can get that antenna a couple feet higher, that actually might compensate for the loss in earnings. So I'd say it's highly situational. Say after August, there are 200K hotspots set up, and will there still be money to be made, or fractions of H&T? Great question. There will be lower amounts of H&T earned, I believe. I'm not aware of if we've reached our peak of minting of H&T per month. Can you put the Bobcat miner antenna on a porch or strictly indoors? That's a great question. I do not know the answer to that. I would say experiment. I would almost, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. That's a good question. If I have a roof phone antenna, will it interfere with my signal if I put an antenna near them? I did talk about that earlier. It should not. So you can get the longer answer by watching this when it's posted later. Liberty and Constitution. I read somewhere that there's approximately 0.4 dB loss per 5 feet of cable. Yeah, it depends on the cable type. So you'd have to look that up. Also frequency. There's you have to look at what frequency is happening for that particular cable, because there's different dBi loss per dependent on the frequency. Oh no, I'm so sorry that I had 2 live streams. My huge apologies for that. I created one and then it didn't work very well, so I killed it. So I apologize. Let's see here. Can I put a Helium in my car? No, I would not. Well, I would probably not recommend that, because you're going to have to assert your location every time you move your car. So that would not be a good idea. Now, if you drive it to some place and then do your location assert and you leave it there for a while, maybe that's an interesting application. I thought about even, say these, if somehow vehicles become autonomous, then you could have a cart just park on the side of the road and then mine, do the location cert and mine HNT on its own. That would be an interesting application. Can an antenna with 8 dBi and be placed too high, potentially missing other hotspots at a lower elevation? Yes, definitely. So that goes back to this. We kind of talked about this, but I'm glad you asked this question. So now this cone is 9 dBi here, but you can see that if this car at the bottom here, the 9 dBi cone doesn't quite reach this car. So yes, you would overshoot something that's very, very close. And that's actually what I'm experiencing right now, is that there's a couple hotspots close to me that I'm overshooting, I guess. And so and I believe I had them with the 8 dBi antenna. So if I lower it just a little bit, then hopefully I can get them back. And I think that when you have a wide range of hotspots close to you and far away from you and in a circular shape around you, that really helps earnings. And I think, like I said, in maybe not even a previous video here, but I remember I'm on film in somewhere in some video saying that I kind of just struck gold, struck HNT with my placement. And I didn't source all my locations or anything like that. I just put up an antenna and got lucky. Now, height has a lot to do with that. So I did put that. I already had a mast on top of my roof. So just putting it at the top of my mast really helped. If my antenna is outside on the first floor balcony, 2 feet away from the building, is it possible that I'm losing all the dBi to the other side behind the balcony? So I believe what this is if the building is here and the balcony is right here, and you have your antenna just on your balcony, are you losing dB here? And I want to say yes. However, the interesting thing that if you look at the people's hotspot and the pictures that I posted and the video that I talked through about it, is there's an instance where where they're getting witnesses, even though like there's a building right there, they're getting witnesses from I think it's 10 kilometers back to the west, because their balcony faces east, and they're getting witnesses back to the west for quite a ways. So I was really surprised when I saw that. So I don't know if the signal is maybe bouncing across and then hitting some building and then bouncing back the other way. I don't know what's going on there, but it's a really interesting thing to get a witness back the other direction. Good question though. So try it, experiment. That's my answer. My city has one other helium miner. I am buying three, very flat city. Does it matter if my entire city only has four? No. I would recommend maybe up to five. I think that that's like where your earnings start to peak. So it's the more you have, at least right now, I think you get to 2 or 3 witnesses, and then you get to around maybe 10 HNT currently. And I put the asterisk on all. Anytime I give you an amount, that will go down over time as the network grows, as we've kind of talked about. So you really want to target about 5 hotspots for a city. And you can with even 5, you can cover a whole like city, like metro, suburbs area, depended on, if it's pretty flat, obviously. There's a lot that you can cover just with a set of 5. And another recommendation I've heard recently is you work a hexagon. So you have a hexagon there, and then you place it on all those sides and then cover the city that way. So good question. I'm ordering 6 miners this week. I'm on the fence to whether go all Bobcats or get a mix of Nebra and 3 Bobcats, or a mix between manufacturers. That's an interesting question. I don't know, I like experimenting. So personally, I would get some of each just because I like seeing the difference. And then, of course, the other side is risk, right? Both these manufacturers have not shipped product. So when you're getting an iteration of a product, there's usually more quality built into that when you get the second iteration. So if you're dividing that, of course, there's risk, and you might end up where like, oh man, I wish I bought, if you have 2 manufacturers, A and B, you might get all A, and then, oh man, there was a problem, and now I wish I had all B. Or if you get half, you might end up, oh, I wish I would have just gotten all in one. There's just not enough data right now to even talk about what manufacturer you should go with yet, because there's only been 2 hotspots officially released. Because the Bobcat miner costs 100 more, but it has a better antenna, correct? So better, again, we talked about antenna is very contextual based off of height, the surroundings, whether you're indoors or not. I really want to kind of quash or squash the is this antenna better? It's entirely contextual. You got to experiment and figure out what works for your area. Again, this is a really important chart to look at in that, I got it upside down, doesn't matter. Anyways, this is a really important chart because it is highly contextual about what is the best antenna for your placements. Let's see, I'm searching through the questions here. Y'all are motoring. I'm having a difficult time to keep up here. Oh, there's other languages. I love other languages. Thank you for being just around the world and participate in this. I hope that there's communities that can spring up to communicate and share the languages and that means the most to you, is most understandable to you. So shout out for all y'all that speak different languages. Would I say outdoor is greater than indoor antenna? I want to say that, but I'm going to go back to my previous statement and say it's entirely contextual. Because remember, even going back farther in the stream, if you place all your miners at that 300 meter spacing, then it doesn't quite, as long as they can communicate with each other, it doesn't matter what antenna you're using. So that's the big thing. It's how fast can you connect to other hotspots as far as like mining rewards. And of course, the easy way is like I did, throw up an antenna on your roof and do all the appropriate things to ground it. And you still, if you're in a valley or a bowl or something like that, you still may not have your witnesses. So it's very contextual. In general, I would say if you're in a flat area, going outdoor is probably a better thing. When you first set up the miner location, does it go by GPS location or does it set up by the location you enter? You can do either. It primes it with the GPS location that it detects from your phone, but you can change that location. So that's how all these hosting companies are able to assert at the location that is being hosted at. And I'm a huge supporter of remote location asserts, because if the company sends me a miner and I'm hosting it and the location is wrong, I would love to be able to change that location myself and to be empowered via some agreement with the owner of the hotspot that it is okay to assert the location at a new location. Plus it keeps it mining, keeps coverage high. So I can't right now think of a way that would be a bad thing to assert that location at a different location. Good question. And then maybe another in that vein is you want the location asserted to be the location of the antenna. So in most cases, that's not going to be a huge difference. But if I had some really long cable run that went horizontally and then up some tower, then I might want to assert at a different location than where it defaults to, or like an address, at the home or something like that. Let's see here. Looking through more questions. I'm not seeing any more on antennas. Trying to think if there's any other topics that would be good to discuss. Again, this is, I can just show off some of the things. Again, this is the Rack 8 dBi antenna. I've got another one on order, plus ones at smaller dBis from Parley Labs. Shout out to them. They do a great job. Also, some other visual things. This is actually the grounding cable that I used from my lightning arrestor to my grounding clamp. So it's just what I use. You can check the video for all those links. All right, here's another one. This is the solid copper grounding for the highest kind of grounding cable. So obviously you have a choice between this is coming off the lightning arrestor usually, and then this is for your grounding your mast. So this is going to provide a little bit better protection than this one, but this is a just in case type of thing. Yeah, so those are some, I like props, so. Lightning arrestor, I've shown those off before. Here is the, so this little adapter, I needed at one point, and it probably cost me 10 or 20 HNT because I was down for 2 days because I didn't have this little adapter. So this goes from SMA to RPSMA. Yeah, I was pretty frustrated about that. But you make mistakes, and so that's why I've really said that over and over in every video, is make sure you have the right connector, because that will hurt your earnings. I think I saw a question about the length of this. This is, I think, about 3 feet. I don't have a tape measure on me, so, but yeah, it's about 3 feet. So I'm about 6 feet tall, so yeah, about 3 feet. Yes, on those connectors, good call out. Is there loss with connectors or radio frequency bleed? Yes. However, does it matter as much? Again, we say antennas are highly contextual, and so you can compensate even if you have a connector. So keep that in mind. 10 dBi is too strong. Helium will notice and reduce your reward. Ooh, that's interesting. I haven't heard of that, but thanks for the call out. We'll be watching that, especially on the People's Hotspot. If their earnings drop, then that would be very, very interesting to share that data. And so on the 8 dBi, I'm not saying that the 8 dBi is the best. Again, if you, I hope by the end of this video, you can say that I don't have this is the best antenna. It's highly contextual based on where you use it and the applications that you use it to get the best coverage. That's what we're after. It's not the best antenna. It's what antenna gives you the best coverage for your particular needs. Oh, this is a good question. 8 dBi directly on the Nebra outdoor housing. Do you think it would cause damage to the housing? I think that that's a really important thought to consider, is if you've got a high wind load and then your antenna is connected directly to the miner, that if that breaks, you could break the connection, pull the connector side out of the miner, and then have your miner down. So I really recommend you have a cable in between that, even just a small one, to protect the two. Really would recommend that. Even if you have to accept a little bit of loss, I'd much rather have to, like, you know, replace the antenna or something like that than to replace the miner. Can I use the rack 8 dBi on a Bobcat? We talked about that earlier, so you'll definitely want to watch the whole video again. As an American, should I order from the manufacturer or a local distributor? Which one is fastest? That's kind of up to you. I think Nebra is the only one. I mean, well, sorry, CalChip is another one. Nebra is using Parley Labs, and then CalChip is using, or is distributing for rack. So you can order from both. That's a personal decision. Maybe the only thing that I would context in there is maybe there's a little bit more on the faster delivery. There might be a little bit cheaper to order from the local distributor rather than directly from overseas. And then obviously the shipping time would vary as well. I know some YouTuber will receive Bobcat. Do you have any Bobcat shipping information? I do know that Bobcat is shipping out units to a variety of, I think, Helium influencers and such, and they also may include YouTubers. So yeah, keep that in mind. There should be data, hopefully very, very soon. One, I think I saw somewhere that might have been Tech Hustler, was saying that he was going to get his in 2 weeks or something like, or next week, sorry. So I guess let's watch and see what happens. Let's see here. What can I do to prepare for the rack V2 miner before it's delivered? Are the locators and antennas a must if I'm in an area where there aren't that many around me? Possibly. It really depends on you could look up line of sight. There's a couple websites out there that are telling information on line of sight from your antenna and how high you might need to be to get to your nearest hotspot. You can also use the Helium Explorer map, and there's a measurement tool in there, so you can measure how many kilometers is from your location to the other location that like the nearest hotspot or something like that. All hotspots from all manufacturers are the same. Yes, there are some variations on the equipment used and that kind of stuff, but there's really not supposed to be any mining differences between the hotspots. The Bobcat one apparently does have a little bit juicier CPU on it, or processor. So what does that gain? probably not anything. Maybe, and this will be interesting to watch, is could it affect consensus at all? Not that consensus would choose Bobcat miners, just more so, could it hammer through the data a little bit better on consensus? Maybe. I don't know. Would that affect rewards? I don't think so. Not at this point. Where do I? Hey, Crash Gordon, nice to see you. Crash and I go way back. Where do you get, where I recommend to get miners right now? They seem to be back ordered everywhere. Can I still make one with Raspberry Pi? Oh my gosh. I wish you could make your own, but some nefarious people ruined DIY. We could have all built our own, but some people built them such that it cheated the system. So where would I recommend? Sounds like everybody's been delayed. Let's see here. Man, it would be hard pressed for me to give an answer on where I would best recommend right now, because it's all just, a miner is a miner. And I would, even going back to last fall when the supply chain issues hit, I ended up ordering from a hosting company, Emirate, to get my miners because they had availability. And I do not regret that decision at all, because some HNT is better than no HNT. So I stand behind that. Now, could I have chosen a different hosting company? Possibly, if they had miners. It all depends on supply. So again, miners are better than no miners any day of the week. So sounds like CalChip is going to just hit a bunch of miners here and sending them out very, very soon. There's like 2 shipments in progress, may have already been received by CalChip. I'm not sure, but they're gonna be hit. They're gonna be the ones active in sending them out. Maybe sounds like Bobcat might get them out next with their shipments, and they, at least from my discussions with them, they're saying that they're going to be pretty regular at that. I think it was the 8 to 12 week time frame, but they're saying that they have the ability to manufacture really regularly and ship really regularly. So we'll see what happens there. Sorry, I'm sliding away from antennas a bit. So, but this is a problem. We all need miners. That's a very key. We can't even talk about or use antennas until we get get our miners. So what else? We are at an hour, so I'll probably start wrapping this up. Earnings, I'm not going to talk about how much earnings total I've made. That's just something that I'd rather keep to myself. So thanks. I've quoted as there's a couple videos in there that I talked about roughly how much I've made at that point in time. So let's see here. Nebra, yeah, so I talked about CalChip, I talked about Bobcat. Nebra sounds like it's coming out next. Maybe Nebra or Synchробit. I'm not sure who's going to get out next in that vein. I am definitely not a millionaire, for 100% sure. Depending on the price of HNT. Of course, we all could be HNT millionaires. I don't know. Have I heard of Amazon Sidewalk? Yes. I would say recommend just go out to the Helium podcast. They do talk about that in there. Sounds like it's just not, it sounds similar, but it's really not enough similar that it's a threat. All right, I'm going to draw this to a close. If you have more questions on antennas, you can always reach out and in the comments below. Remember to check the descriptions for links. And as if you haven't noticed, I do have referral links in there when appropriate. I sure do appreciate the support, but I really encourage you to use any referral that you've established the relationships with, that you want to give them a nudge and say, hey, great job, appreciate your work. So want to throw that out there. Yeah, I'll keep sharing the antenna information as I get my more of my antennas and vary them. I'm also interested in a solar setup, if that's indeed possible. I see that if you want to give him a follow, I think it's at SimonFuture2 on Twitter. He is doing an experiment with some solar stuff. So it'll be really interesting to follow him and see what he's able to do and really help share that knowledge on solar setups. I know that there's a couple other threads out there too. So yeah. All right. Thank you again for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, share with your friends. Always drop comments in there. I'll get to them when I can. Again, I'm usually busy through the week with all the normal duties in my life. So this is the day of the week that I tend to process through those. So if I don't get to you right away, please be patient. And you can even ping me again if you still want an answer on something. So thank you very much for watching. Take care and peace.